Hello students, and welcome to chapter number 12. In this chapter we will be discussing employment communication. A big part of business communication is how you would communicate with potential employers. So how would you promote yourself, promote your own abilities and skills, and how would you initiate the process of communicating with a potential employer? So how would you format and create your resume? What would you do in a job interview? What should be included in a cover letter, for example. All of those things are part of the employment process, and these are the topics that we will be focusing on throughout this video. This is a typical job advertisement or a job posting. When you apply for jobs, typically online, you would see advertisements and postings like this one. You would have, a company or an organization announcing that they have a vacancy, and in that vacancy post, you would see the job title, you would see the, a brief description of the job, and also a brief description of the requirements of the job, and lots of other information as well, like how would you apply for this job, etc. So the point here is that you would have to see, first of all, whether or not this is something that you are interested in, and whether or not you have all of those required skills, job experience, etc. So once you have made that evaluation that I am suitable for this job, then you would start the process of communicating with the employer and going through the process. So this would be our roadmap for navigating through this chapter. So we would begin with resumes and how what's the purpose of a resume, what do we do in a resume, and then we would also discuss cover letters, which are very important as well and are an essential requirement whenever you apply for any type of job. And then of course the interview, which is a must for any job candidate, and then the follow-up. So after the interview or after those steps, how would you would typically wait for a response. So what if they take so long? How would you communicate with them, and how would you follow up? And then finally, something about etiquette. So how would you conduct yourself and carry yourself out through the in the whole process from A to Z. So this would be the the emphasis of our discussion throughout this chapter. One of the things that you should know as a candidate, as a job seeker, is what is the selection process. So what are the different steps that you would have to go through from beginning to end, so that you would understand what you have to do and how would you prepare for it. So throughout the job application process, there are things that you are responsible of, and there are things that the company initiates. So at the beginning, of course, the company posts the job. So the company would advertise on their website, on their Twitter account, on their LinkedIn profile that we have a vacancy. So once they announce this, then you, the applicant, the job seeker, you would apply for this job. So now thousands of people applied for this one opening. So the company now, typically the HR department or the recruitment team, is they are going to screen those resumes. So they would go through the resumes and see which one of those are considered strong fit, or they strongly match the requirements of the job. And then you would receive the news, so either through email or through a phone call, that you have been shortlisted or rejected, that you are now eligible to go for an interview, or you would be told that you are not a good fit and therefore you have been rejected. What happens next? If you are accepted, that you would go through something called a screening interview. So it's a job interview, and typically this would be your first interview. So there are second and third interviews in companies. So a screening interview, sometimes it could happen through the phone, It could nowadays, because of the problems of the pandemic, so it could happen through any video platform, things like Skype or Zoom. And then the sixth step would be narrowing down the pool by the company. So now, as we mentioned, tens of people applied. They screened the resumes, so they shortlisted some people, and then they took a first or a screening interview, and then they narrowed down the pool. So out of the 50 people who went through the screening interview, now we have only 20. Okay, and then you would receive the news that you have passed the screening interview or you have been rejected. And then when you are accepted, you would go through a first interview. So that's kind of a longer interview with a bigger panel of interviewers. Typically, there would be the your future supervisor and a subject matter person, a subject matter expert, and some representative also of the HR department. And in that interview, you will be asked plenty of questions to really assess your abilities. And then again, it's narrowing down the pool. The whole purpose of this interview is to lower the number from 20 people now to only 5. And then you would receive the news whether or not you have passed this interview, and then you would go through a second interview, etc. So not necessarily that you would have to go through 3 different interviews. Sometimes it's only 1. Sometimes it's even more than 3 interviews. It depends on the company. It depends on how competitive the job application is. So once you receive the news that you have been selected, that you have been accepted by the company to become the the job holder, so now you would be congratulated by the company. You would receive an email that you have been selected by the company. You would receive the job offer, and then you would either accept or reject the job. So that's kind of the whole process. So it begins with the posting of the job by the company, and then a whole series of steps with the purpose of narrowing down the number of people who applied for the job. And then finally, it comes down to whether or not you, the candidate, have been accepted, and whether you would accept or reject the job offer. So the first documents, one of the first things that you need to prepare in order to apply for any job, specifically online, is that you would be asked to upload or share or send through email a resume. And oftentimes there's some sort of confusion between resumes and CVs. CV stands for curriculum vitae. So what is a curriculum vitae? What is a CV? Is it different from a resume? Yes, it is. Even by HR departments, those two terms, resumes and CVs, are used interchangeably. So whenever an HR person says resume, he could mean a CV, or to him a CV is also a resume. There is no difference to the recruitment people. But in reality, there is a difference, and this is what you need to learn. So a curriculum vitae is longer than a resume. It is more detailed, and it's typically created for academic jobs. Typically created for academic jobs, for people who are going to become lecturers, professors, etc. Okay, so it's longer, it's more detailed. It mentions a lot of things, not only education and work experience. It would mention all your contributions to the academic field. So things like your publications, what presentations or training courses have you delivered, all of your achievements. So it's longer and it's more detailed, and it's specifically created for academic jobs. A resume, however, is shorter. It is basically a summary of your education and work history and some highlighted accomplishments if applicable. So there are optional sections like your objectives, your career statement. In nowadays, recruiters, so the people who are in charge of recruitment in the HR department, they wouldn't say that that part is absolutely essential. So as long as you have the most important sections in the resume, we wouldn't need to know about your career statement or your objective. We really need to know about your education. We really need to know about your work experience, and we really need to know about your skills and abilities. So it's very concise. It should be limited to 1 page, and it could go to two pages if necessary, if absolutely necessary. But the point here is to make it as concise as possible. So you would oftentimes see that a resume is basically bullet points, so that it is kept short and brief, and it basically just highlights the most basic information that a recruiter needs to know about you. The formats of resumes. So there are different types of resumes based on how you design them, how you present the information in the resume. There is something called a functional resume. So it focuses on the functions. It focuses on the skills. It focuses on what you are capable of, on your experience. So instead of listing your work history, for example, in a chronological order, so in the order in which you have acquired those or you have held those jobs, you would focus on the skill. So instead of saying from 2001 to 2003 I have worked in that company, and then from 2003 to 2009 I worked at that company. No, that's called a chronological resume. In the functional resume, what you would highlight are the skills. So you would say, things like project management. This is one of the biggest skills that you have. And then you would mention, how did you acquire these skills? You have worked in company A from that time to that time, and then from company B from that time to that time, etc. So the focus here in a functional resume is going to be the functions that you have worked on, and the skills that, and the abilities that you have. It is said that this type of resume, this functional resume, are most suited for those who are changing careers. So for example, if you have worked as a teacher for 9 years or even more, and you want to change your job from being a teacher to something else, to an accountant, let's say, okay? So how, if you tell your employer, if you give the employer a resume that focuses on only your job title as a teacher, then most likely no one is going to consider you for the job of an accountant. But when you present your resume in a functional way, so that you highlight the parts of your job as a teacher in which you worked, in which you can benefit them as an accountant, then this resume format would be most effective. And then this format also is suitable for for those who don't have work history or work experience that is relevant or related directly to the job, such as the example we mentioned. So in this way, you are trying to match and highlight and emphasize your skills instead of your work experience, instead of your job titles that you held previously. And the most common format of resumes is what is called the chronological. So the chronological resume is all about history. It's all about history of education and history of work experience. So in education, you would mention what you have acquired, and typically it's in reverse chronological order. So instead of mentioning high school, for example, and then your college education, no, you start with the most recent. So yes, it is chronological, but it's reverse. So it's about it's about the most recent job titles and the most recent education credentials that you had, that you acquired. So in job history, for example, you would start mentioning what is the job that you have right now, and then after that you would mention the job that you've had before that, and it goes on and on like that. So it is the most common type of resume, and typically speaking, employers and HR people, they prefer this type of format because it makes it easier for them to see whether or not you have relevant work experience and relevant education as well. So how would you start preparing your resume? As we mentioned already, you need to keep it brief. You need to select the format. Is it functional or is it chronological? The safest option, of course, is to go with the chronological type resume because this is what employers prefer. So you have to understand what is the goal, what is the purpose of a resume. It's not to get you a job, it's to get you a job interview. So it's your key to a job interview. I mean, regardless of how good your resume is and how relevant the skills that you showed in the resume and how relevant your job experience is to the job that you're applying for, no one is just going to say, okay, you're hired, without interviewing you, without making you take a test, for example. So the key of the purpose to a resume is that it's only a key to getting you to the next step. That's it. So in order for you to get that job interview, you have to pay special attention to the resume because it's an essential step. So it basically sets you apart from all the other candidates who are applying for the same job. So when there's an announcement about a vacancy, tens and hundreds and maybe thousands of people are going to apply, and there are a lot of qualified people out there. So the resume is going to make you different, and this is you should keep this goal in mind, is that I have to make my resume stand out in comparison to all the other people who are applying for the same job as I am. Otherwise, you are just going to be neglected. So try your best to make your resume stand out. And when we say stand out, making it unique, it's not in terms of colors, and font types and font sizes that you use. It's in terms of the skills. It's in terms of, the work experience, the training courses, etc. So one of the good ideas that you want to follow when you are preparing your resume is to know what recruiters say. Recruiters hate certain types of resumes. They absolutely say that there are a number of mistakes that when we encounter those mistakes in a resume, we would neglect it. We would just overlook this resume. So take a look at those 10 mistakes that recruiters absolutely hate that would result in your resume being overlooked. So try your best not to have any spelling errors, typos, or poor grammar. This is how thorough and how careful and how attentive you should be when it comes to formatting and creating and designing your resume. You shouldn't have spelling errors. Otherwise, it's a bad signal. It doesn't indicate that you are professional enough to review and revise your resume. And the second issue, when the resume is too duty oriented. So it reads like a job description failing to explain the job seeker's relevant accomplishment. What that means is that sometimes people write their resumes in a way that is so mechanical, that is so about the duties and the tasks and the responsibilities of the job only, without mentioning any accomplishments. What recruiters want to see nowadays is how you can bring value to them, not only what you can do in terms of job responsibilities and duties, but what can you bring differently to what type of value can you present to this organization. So mention in your resume some of your accomplishments as a previous job holder, or even as a student. When you mention that you have that you have been awarded a certain prize as a student, or when you have accomplished a number of hours in volunteering, or etc. Things like that are they go a long way in setting you apart from others. Missing dates or inaccurate dates, that's a big problem for recruiters. When you say that I have volunteered at at a certain mosque, let's say. Okay, but when? We need to have dates. You shouldn't mention anything without proper, accurate dates. We want to know how long ago was this, how recent is this. Of course, you should avoid missing contact information or inaccurate or unprofessional email addresses. So in a resume, you want to include your contact information. You want to mention your mobile phone number. You want to mention your email address. You want to mention where you live right now, so like your address. So you want full, complete contact information, and we want them to be accurate as well. And you should avoid unprofessional email addresses. So we don't want to see, as HR people, we don't want to see things like niceboy@hotmail.com, or unprofessional email addresses like that are not going to give a good first impression about yourself. So if you don't have a professional email address, create one. And the safest way you could go is by using your name. So ahmed.abdullah@gmail.com, a professional email address that is not going to give you any issues with recruiters. Another problem is poor formatting. So boxes, template, table use of header and footer, etc. So even though we always say that it's the content of the resume, so it's the it's the words in the resume, it's the actual content of what you are presenting in the resume what matters, but it's the formatting also is important, because they both support each other. When you have great work experience and excellent skills and strong education, but the way you present it, the way you write it in Microsoft Word, for example, is poor, then you have undermined your own efforts. So pay attention also to formatting. So the type of the font, the size of the font, the color of the font, keep it professional, keep it simple. And nowadays you have ready-made templates that are very professional and available for free, either through Microsoft Word itself or online. When a resume is organized by function as opposed to chronological. So as we mentioned, recruiters prefer chronological resumes. To them, this is easier to screen and easier to determine if you have the relevant skills and relevant work experience or not. So always go with the chronological resume, where you organize everything in in historical or in reverse historical order. So the most recent job and the most recent education first. Long resumes that are greater than 2 pages are not liked by recruiters, especially if you are a fresh graduate. Then you should try your best to limit your resume to only 1 page. You could go up to 2 pages, but only if you have something of value to add. long, dense paragraphs are not well received by recruiters. So try, as we mentioned, keep it bulleted. Try to use bullet points. It is easier for the recruiters to follow. It's easier for the recruiters to determine whether or not you match the job requirements. Unqualified candidates, of course, when the job posting clearly says that for this job you need a bachelor's degree in petroleum engineering, and then you have a bachelor's degree in accounting, for example, and you are applying for this job, of course you are not going to be selected. That's for granted. But the problem is, another problem with that is that when you apply for another job that you might be suitable for in the same company, when the same recruiter is going to screen your resume, he or she is going to remember that he or she saw your name for that job that required a bachelor's degree in petroleum engineering. So they would not like that. They are not going to, maybe they are going to overlook your application because they saw you applying for a job which you have absolutely no qualifications. So always apply for jobs in which you match the requirements. And finally, when you mention personal information that is not relevant to the job. So typically speaking, when you mention things like what books you like to read, or things like hobbies, or other non-essential information that are not related to the job. So try to avoid mentioning personal things, like as we mentioned, like hobbies and like what teams you support, what football teams you support. You would be surprised that people do actually mention that. So try to keep your resume concise and only mention the parts that are relevant to the job that you are applying for. So how to format your resume. This is my advice honestly, instead of creating a resume from scratch, there are templates that are readily available for free, and they are nicely designed and well developed by experts in the field. You can find them through Microsoft Word itself. When you create a new document, you could choose that this is a resume that you are creating, and you would have plenty of templates and formats. You could also search online for available templates, and you would have plenty of sources. Typically speaking, how you should format your resume. What are the things that you should have, and what are the things that you should avoid? So some rules of thumb that you need to follow is that you should have lots of white space, meaning you shouldn't have lots of pictures. You shouldn't use colored backgrounds, for example. Keep it simple, keep it light, and then easy to scan headings and bullets. So your sections, your resume sections, the headings and the titles should be highlighted, should be in bold, and should be in a bigger font maybe. And they should be shown and presented in a way that indicates to the reader that this section talks about work experience, and this section and this part talks about education, etc. You should have clear dates in reverse chronological order, so ordered in a way so that the most recent one is shown first. So the dates should be clear. So and if you can, be as specific as possible with the dates. So mention the day, the month, and the year. Don't suffice with only the year, if possible, if that information is available to you. And then use simple fonts and design features. Keep it simple. Don't go beyond size 12 or 14 for headings, and use standard fonts. So things like Arial or Times New Roman. keep it very, very simple. These are professionally accepted designs. If you go out of the ordinary, it's not going to be well received by recruiters. Other things that you need to pay attention to when you are formatting your resume is that you need to have information that is 100% accurate. So, revise and review your CV at least 10 times to ensure that there are no grammatical errors, no spelling mistakes, no typographical errors, that the information you mentioned is absolutely correct. So even the names of the companies or the name of your college, the dates, make sure that they are 100% correct. And you should have clear descriptions with action verbs. What that means, especially when you are describing what you did in a previous job or in a volunteering kind of experience, so you should have action verbs. So what you actually did. So you opened accounts, you served customers, you coordinated activities. We need to see those verbs so that we have a better idea of what you have done and whether or not you match what the job that you are applying for. So these are the major sections of a resume, the sections that recruiters want to see in a resume. The first thing that we want to see in a resume is, of course, your contact information. And what does that include? It includes everything about you, so how we can reach you. So we want to know your full name, your address, where you live right now, especially in terms of the city and country. We need to know about your email address, and we need to have a phone number. Absolutely. So make sure that your contact information is complete and accurate. And then we need to see something about your education. So when it comes to education, we want to see where you graduated from, when did you graduate, and what is your major. Okay, so what was your major in college? And what is the degree? Is it a bachelor's degree? Is it a diploma? Is it a master's? Is it something else? So we want to know all of this information. So be complete and accurate. And we also, of course, want to see work experience. So in work experience, we want to see which companies, which organizations you worked for before, or you are currently working for. We want to know your job title, of course. So you work at company A in which capacity? What is your job title? Are you a manager? Are you a specialist? Are you an accountant? Are you an engineer? What type of engineer are you? We want to see all of those. And then for each job, of course, we want to see something about responsibilities, achievements, and definitely the dates. The dates should be written for every single thing that you have done. We want to see the dates for work experience. We want to see the dates for education. We want to see the dates also for any training that you had. So dates are important. So for work experience, we want to see the company name. We want to see the job title. And we want to see the dates, of course. And definitely we want to see something about your tasks, duties, responsibilities, and achievements. That's kind of what sets you apart from others. So others are going to write basically what they see in the job description. But if you really want to set yourself apart from others, write something about your achievements on the job. So you have been awarded something, you have been selected as employee of the month in a certain year, or you have processed 5,000 applications in 1 year. We want highlight your achievements. And then of course another major section in a resume is other skills and experiences. So things like, what are you capable of? Especially if you are a fresh graduate, you have to talk about your extracurricular activities. So your student activities, what clubs have you been part of? Have you participated in any competitions, etc.? And then your language skills. What languages do you speak and at which level? You don't say, I speak English, that's it. No, we want to know, what is your English level? Are you fluent? Are you, do you have kind of a, medium level? Are you a beginner? We want to know about those. We also want to know about your computer skills. And nowadays, you don't want to say something like I am good with computers, or you don't want to say I have computer skills. No, we want to know which specific computer skills you have. Is it only Microsoft Office? Is it, if you know about programming languages, what type of programming languages do you know? And at which level are you proficient? If you know about something else when it comes to IT, are you good when it comes to networks? Are you good when it comes to others, famous software like SAP or Primavera, or things like that. So mention what you know in terms of computers and the level at which you are proficient. And then any special, other skills that you have, things like, are you good when it comes to planning? Are you good when it comes to, customer service and, communicating with others? Other things like, for example, you are good when it comes to, managing social media accounts. You can design infographics, all of those skills that are relevant to the job. Now, when it comes to talking about your work experience on the resume, go, of course, with the chronological resume style. Okay, so we mentioned that a couple of times already since the beginning of this video. So the best way to go is to go with a reverse chronological order. So you mention the most recent experience first. It has to be complete. Okay, it has to be complete, meaning, so mention all kinds of jobs that you have held, and for each job you have to mention all of those elements that we talked about. So the name of the company, the job title, the responsibilities, the achievements, and the dates. You have to show how your work experience qualifies you for the specific job that you are applying for. So what that means, what that indicates, what that implies is that you don't use, the same resume for, any kind of job that you're applying for. So each time you apply to a different job, you have to tweak and edit your resume so that you make your current job responsibilities and previous job responsibilities relevant to the job that you are applying for. If you are applying for a customer service job, for example, and you have been working as a teacher, two different jobs, right? So instead of saying things in your, mentioning responsibilities in your job as a teacher that you only teach things, mention how you deal with parents of students, how you deal with students, how you deal with different parties. So you make your your skills and your job responsibilities right now relevant to the job that you are applying for. Use concrete, achievement-oriented words to describe your experience. So those action verbs that we talked about, right? So instead of saying things like, I do customer service on my job. What does that mean, I do customer service? We want to, to learn exactly what you're doing. So you serve customers by, processing applications. You handle phone calls. You process, complaints received through email, for example. You help customers when it comes to opening accounts. These are the things that we want to know about. These are the things that you should write in a resume. You have to also stress and emphasize specific accomplishments that are directly related to the desired job. So, for example, if you have received an award by your employer or during your studies as a student, things that that are related to, for example, commitment, things that are related to negotiation, things that are related to convincing and persuading skills. I know that there was a competition, for example, about a debate competition. So if you won that debate competition, you would mention that, especially if you are applying for the job of a customer service, because this indicates that you have good negotiation skills and good convincing skills. And finally, include relevant unpaid positions. So if you've had volunteering experience, okay, so that's unpaid, or if you had sometimes some summer training or something, as long as you can present it in a way that is relevant to the job that you are now applying for, then include it. If you are unable to present it and show it in a relevant way, then avoid mentioning it. But I do believe that any job that you have held, whether it's paid or unpaid, any volunteering experience that you've had, can be phrased in a way that is relevant to the job that you are applying for. So here's an example of how we could improve this sentence right here. So instead of writing it right like that in a resume, which is kind of a dense sort of short paragraph, let's convert it. Let's make it into bullets. So the before is the version that you see on the left-hand side. So how we can change it. So in here we would use, if you could pause the video and just read through the sentence. You would see that this mentions actually more than one function, more than one responsibility. So it's creating, designing, and developing a new web page. About what, and then at which company. So instead of presenting it like that, just write the name of the company first, so Coca-Cola, and then the first bullet point, creating a web page on sustainability efforts, and then designing, and developing websites regarding, the topic that you are, involved in. So convert whatever you have from paragraphs into bullet points. So resume supplements. In here, nowadays, the most common way of applying to jobs is online, right? So you would have to create a resume through Microsoft Word or some other means, and then you would be asked to upload it to the company's website. But we can also talk about other online resumes. So when you have a LinkedIn profile, for example, or we have special websites for job seekers and for companies to reach those job seekers. So things like bait.com, right? So in there you would have a public profile. So your resume is going to be public and seen by all types of companies. So you have to again follow the same types of standards. The only difference here is that you already have predetermined sections by the website, and you are just simply filling out the missing information. Another very common supplement nowadays is video resumes. I have seen in so many companies nowadays where you are asked by the company to that you are applying to upload a 5-minute video or a 3-minute video or sometimes a 1-minute video introducing yourself, or they would give you a certain type of question and they would ask you record a video answering that question and then upload it. So you have again to be aware of this. So you would follow all of the instructions of a resume, how you present your work experience in terms of how relevant it is to the job that you're applying for, and also you would follow some of the guidelines in some of the previous chapters about oral presentations. It is a presentation. It's an online presentation. It's not a live one maybe, but it is a presentation even if it's for 1 minute. Because you are presenting what? You are presenting yourself and what you are capable of. You are presenting your skills and your, your work experience and how that is relevant to the job that you're applying for. So, advantages of these supplements to the traditional resume: it tells us more about yourself. It tells us more about you. It tells the company more about. We can now see, through a video. Whether or not you have good English skills, whether or not you are, you have good communication skills, because we would see your body language, we would see, things like that. And when it comes to the online resume, so things like LinkedIn profiles and bait.com profiles, again, it tells us more about yourself. It tells us, how you interact with others, because it's kind of like a social media account, but it's only for professionals. So through your LinkedIn profile, we would see, what companies you are interested in, what articles are you, interacting with, etc. And now the second part of our chapter, something that is absolutely essential in the application process, and that is the cover letter, especially online. When you are applying to a job through the company's website, they would ask you to upload to a number of things. The first thing, of course, is the resume, and the second thing is going to be the cover letter. And you don't want to be that person who doesn't upload a cover letter, even if it is optional. So sometimes certain company websites, they tell you that if you want, it's it's an optional thing. You can upload a cover letter or you cannot, or you don't if you don't want to. But including a cover letter is actually important, because sometimes it is what sets you apart from others. They would, it tells more about yourself. It tells more about you. It tells us something, additional than the information that we read on your resume. Now, the cover letter can be an actual written letter, or it can be in the form of an email. So the purpose of this piece of communication, whether it's an actual cover letter, a written one, or an email, is basically a number of things. So you compose a cover letter because, first of all, you want to express your interest in the company and position. So you write to the company, or you send the company an email, because you want to tell them that you are interested in joining them and occupying this vacancy and becoming their next HR analyst or their next mechanical engineer, etc. And one of the purposes of the cover letter as well is to highlight how you, as a candidate, and your special skills and qualities and background specifically fit with the job requirement, so that you show them not only through your resume, but how some other parts about you can be matched with the with the job that they are announcing. And another thing about cover letters or emails is that they show a little bit more about yourself. So they reveal something about your personality. So through your style, they can figure out and infer what kind of a person are you. Are you someone who is a direct one? Are you someone who is, a good communicator or not? And this is, of course, done through, your business writing skills. This is a good way. The cover letter or the email is one of the best ways where you can demonstrate, where you can show, where you can present to the new employer how good are your writing skills. And finally, to provide the employer with logistical information. Logistics, what that means is that, things like how you can be reached, whether or not you can be interviewed in person, or this can be done only electronically, or a lot of other a lot of other information about how you can be reached and how can you set up a meeting with them. So this is why you have to pay extra attention to the cover letter and the email that you compose when you are attaching your resume. These things are very important, and sometimes they do set you apart from other candidates. Now, what do you include in a cover letter? Of course, there are a number of elements. So first of all, you use a standard letter format. So as you can see at the very top of the letter, where you have the address, the date, the person that you are writing to. But of course, in an email, you wouldn't need all of that. You would just, start with the opening directly. Dear Mr. Khalid, and you just begin with the email. But in a letter, if it's a written one, if it's, even if it's an electronic one, you would try your best to use standard letter format. And then, we have talked so many times about the direct or indirect organizational plan. In this case, you go directly to the point. You use the direct plan. You don't want to, go on and then don't mention what exactly you are aiming at here. But what you do in a cover letter or an email is that you begin with the purpose. I am writing you because I want this job, because I'm interested in, the announced vacancy. You keep the opening short. You don't want your opening to be A big paragraph of 6 and 7 sentences. 1 or 2 sentences are sufficient. To the point. Just state your purpose and why you you are interested in this particular job. You explain your interest in the job. So why do you want this particular job? You explain things like your skills are a good match. You explain things like you are interested in a career in this field. You explain why you are interested in this company and how the culture of the company you believe is something that is, a good match with your own personality and style, etc. Other elements include, like, how your experience is relevant to the job that you're applying for. And try to, like the resume, try to keep your letters short. Try to keep it not more than 1 page. Again, people don't like, reading lots of pages and paragraphs about one job candidate. So you need to be aware of that. Keep it short and simple. And then, towards the end, as you close, as you conclude, ask for an interview. Tell them that I hope you find my CV to your satisfaction, my resume to your satisfaction, and I would be glad to attend an interview at your earliest convenient time. Politely and respectfully ask them to be interviewed. And finally, use a standard closing as you would use in any letter or an email. With best regards, Ahmed. Sincerely, or thank you for considering me, and you mention your name. Keep it simple and to the point. That's the key to a good cover letter or email. The whole point of using such pieces of communication is to ensure that you are supporting your application, that you are highlighting and pointing certain parts of your resume so that they focus their attention on you, and you stand out amongst other candidates. Now, a question that arises is how you find networking contacts. So how do I find someone to write to? You use a cover letter or an email sometimes, because the company, when they announce for a position, for a vacancy, they would mention that you need to send an email to this following address. Or when you apply through the company's website, they would say just upload a cover letter here. But sometimes, you can send out unsolicited applications. What that means is that the company didn't announce any vacancy. They didn't say that we have job openings, come and apply. They didn't say that. But they do have vacancies, which they didn't announce. So how can you find people to approach, to send emails to send letters to? You need to expand your job search by meeting with people. It's all about networking. One of the, the number one tool, the number one way that people, secure jobs is through their network. What we mean by network, your connections, the people that you know. So how can you find such people? One of the best things is the alumni of your college. So the people who have already graduated from JUC, who are now working at Aramco, at SABIC, at the Royal Commission, etc., you can approach them, you can contact them, and ask them to try to help you with your application. Friends and family, of course. You have relatives, and you have people that who work at such companies. You might think about sending them your resume in a professional way, and they might help you out with the with your application. The company's website, sometimes certain companies on their website, they have a directory where the names of employees are there, as well as their contact information, and also articles about the company. So certain employees and executives of companies, they are very active on social media. For example, they have public Twitter accounts, LinkedIn profiles, they write in newspapers and such. And so when you know who they are, and sometimes they share their contact information, now you can send them an email telling them that you are interested in joining their company. If they have vacancies, you are more than happy to be considered. So it's all about expanding your network. Even now as a student, this is what you should be working on. Try to get to know others. Create a LinkedIn profile. Try to start having connections with people. This is how you would improve your chances of securing a job. Now, the next big part of our chapter and of any application process is, of course, the interview. It's again only a tool, only one of the methods that are used by employers to determine and to assess candidates and to determine whether or not they are a good fit with the opening. So, what are some of the issues with regards to interviews? First of all, interviews have many types of questions, and many different types of, conditions. Each and every one of them is aimed at, measuring a certain, construct, measuring a certain aspect about you, the job candidate. So one of the question types is quite standard, where it's just general questions. Tell us about yourself. Tell us why you are a good fit with this, why you think we should give you this job, etc. So standard questions, they are just aimed at measuring your knowledge. Other types of questions are called behavioral questions. So in behavioral questions, you are asked specific questions about your past behaviors because they want to predict, they want to guess, they want to see how, deduce how would you behave in the future. So in this type of questions, you would see questions phrased like this: tell me about a time when. Tell me about a time when. So tell me about a time when you encountered, a problem with a team member and you, overcome that problem. So you want to say things about, a similar situation, and you want to highlight how you handle that situation in an effective way. Tell me about a time when you had a complex project and you didn't meet the deadline, for example. How did you handle that situation? So why they are asking such type of questions? They want to, they are trying to put you in situations that are similar to the job that you will be holding if you were selected, and they are trying to see if your actions in the past can predict what you will do in the future. And then you have case questions. So in this case, in this scenario, you would be given a case. You would be given a question. They would tell you, you are a manager, and an employee is shouting at another colleague. How would you behave? How would you handle that situation? So you would be given a case. And then stress questions, which are quite rare to rarely used nowadays, but they are something to prepare for when you are applying for jobs. So they simulate stressful environments. So in this case, you would encounter questions from interviewers who are trying to stress you out, who are trying to provoke you, who are trying to push you, who are trying to make you nervous. So sometimes they would be very rude to you. So they would, constantly interrupt you. The reason why they are doing that is because they, the conditions of the job that you are applying to are stressful. The conditions of the job require someone who is patient, who is calm under pressure. So they create, an environment like that during the interview to see how you would behave under stress. Here are a number of examples on behavioral interview questions. Remember, the goal of behavioral interview questions is to assess, is to predict. How would you behave in a situation that you will face on the job based on past behaviors that you have displayed before? So they would ask you questions like this. Typically, the wording of the questions will be, tell me about a time when. But of course, there are so many different ways to ask that question. So tell me about a time when you've had, a difficult project to handle. Tell me about a time when you disagreed with your supervisor, for example. Those behavioral questions aim at, seeing how competent you are in terms of relationship building, for example. So how would you handle social situations, things that have to do with interactions, or the competency that is related to problem solving and decision making. So tell me about a time when you faced a problem on the job and how did you solve it. Tell me about a time when you had to coordinate with a number of different departments and how did you handle that situation. So things like that, with the aim of seeing how your behavior in the past is an indication of your behavior in the future. So you can pause the video and see some of the examples of those behavioral questions, and these are very common in job interviews. So you have to prepare some of the, some answers before you come to the interview. You can expect that you would be asked a behavioral question. So try to remember, try to recall some of the, difficult projects that you handled, even if you are a fresh graduate, even if you are still a student. You don't have previous job experience, but things that you've handled as a student, a difficult assignment, a volunteering experience, anything that you've handled, whether it's on campus or off campus. So try to relate. And a bad answer would be, I never had a situation like that. They want to know more. So you can tell them, well, even though I've never had a supervisor per se, but I've had a teacher, and the teacher is kind of like my supervisor. So I've dealt with him or her in that manner. So behavioral questions are very important, and they have a lot of weight when it comes to making the decision whether or not you have passed the interview. One of the good tools, one of the effective tools that you can use to answer behavioral interview questions is what is called the STAR method, or the STAR response. S-T-A-R. S stands for situation, T stands for task, A stands for action, and R is for result. So when you are forming your answer to a behavioral question, break down your answer in terms of these factors. So mention the situation or the task. So the question is asking about, tell me about a time when, or describe a time when you've had a difficult project and how did you handle it. So first of all, describe the project or the task itself. So mention, for example, that it was an assignment in one of your courses called business communication, and you've had to prepare a video for 5 minutes, and it was your first time ever doing such a thing. So give me some background information about the project, about the situation, about the task, so that I, the interviewer, would understand the context. Then describe the action. So what did you do? So the question is, how did you, tell me about a time when you've had a difficult project and how did you handle it? So tell me, how did you handle it? Okay, what did you do? So for example, you made a plan, you asked for someone's advice, you prepared, you watched some other sources to, get more familiar with the concept of videos, etc. So tell me, or tell the person who is asking the question, how did you handle the situation? And then finally, the R is the result. So what was the result? So we don't want to know only what was the situation and how you handled it, but were you successful? And you should bring examples. You should mention examples in which you were actually successful. Otherwise, this kind of defeats the purpose. So how did the situation turn out? Was it a successful result? So you can tell me, for example, that yes, and I was happy to receive 10 out of 10 or 9 out of 10 on that assignment, and actually the professor or the teacher was very happy with my performance, etc. Okay, so how you can prove that your action was appropriate in the situation. So what was the result? you got 10 out of 10. If you were an employee, you received some award, you received a nice performance evaluation, etc. So the STAR method for answering behavioral interview questions: describe the situation or the task, give some background information, then describe what did you do, how did you handle that situation, the actions, and then what was the result. And hopefully it was a successful one. And now with the next type of questions in interviews, and that is case interview questions. So it's a case. It's you are given an imaginary, a hypothetical situation, and you are asked to show and to explain how would you handle that situation. So the difference between behavioral and case interview questions is that behavioral questions are asking about things that have already happened, but case questions are asking about imaginary situations, hypothetical situations. So you would see questions like, imagine if, or what if you were the company's CEO? What would be your first decision and why? How would you, if you were given the task of improving the company's sales, what would you do? If you were the team leader for an engineering project, what would your first decision be? So things like that. If you want, you can pause the video and read through some of these questions here. And of course, there are plenty of examples available online. So just remember that the purpose of case questions is to assess a number of things, not only your technical expertise. And when I say technical, it doesn't necessarily have to be about computers or engineering. When I say technical, it's about the subject, deep knowledge about the subject, whether it's marketing, whether it's management, whether it's engineering, etc. So case interview questions are trying to assess your technical knowledge and your communication skills. And of course, some other factors like decision making. So because they're asking about what decisions you would make. So the logic and the rationale behind making some of those decisions, and some of some of the points of asking case interview questions as well could be trying to gauge whether or not you possess leadership qualities. So they are definitely an important type of questions for which you have to prepare. So in case you were given such a question, how would you handle it? Of course, you have to understand the question clearly. So if you want, you can ask follow-up questions and then try to organize your answer and present it in a logical manner, depending, of course, on the topic. And then finally, where we have stress interview questions. Remember, we talked about stress interview questions in the previous slide, and we mentioned that they try to simulate a stressful environment so that your behavior and your temper basically is assessed. In certain jobs require a lot of patience, especially when it comes to jobs like handling customers, frontline employees, IT help desk, because you would be always dealing with people, and people are a major source of stress. So stress interview questions try to simulate some of those stressful conditions and try to gauge and see how would you behave in such situations. So it's a good idea to remember to keep calm and not be provoked, because some of those interviewers are going to be rude. They are going to take it to the extra, go the extra mile and try to provoke you and to make you become angry. But try to remember, it's all about gauging. It's all about assessing you. So keep calm and try your best to answer the question in the most respectful way. There are many different formats for a job interview. So it could happen face-to-face, or it could happen through a phone call, or through one of those video applications. So you have to prepare accordingly. And if you want to be professional, you need to ensure that your surroundings are appropriate for this level of video. So you need to have a neat working space. You need to be in a room with good lighting, without any noises or distractions. So make sure that the wall behind you is looking good, that, if the camera is going to also show your desk or your office in general, make sure that everything is looking tidy and neat and professional. You need, of course, to dress professionally, so as if you were in an face-to-face in a face-to-face interview. So you need to dress professionally with business attire, with formal clothing, and also practice with a friend to check lighting, sound, etc. So if it's going to be a video interview using Zoom or Skype, start a video chat with one of your friends to see if the angle of the camera is looking good, if the lighting is okay, if the sound is good, or do you need to use a mic and a headphone, etc. And finally, consider shorter responses to make it easier for the interviewer to jump in for phone interviews especially. So when you are asked a question, especially if it's a phone call, it's difficult to see the person interviewing you. So make sure that you keep your responses short, so that in case the interviewer has kind of a follow-up or a comment to make, they don't feel like they are interrupting you, or they don't feel like they have to wait for you to finish what you want to say for a very long time. So video and phone interviews are actually very common, especially earlier in the selection process. Remember, we said that there's typically a screening interview, just an interview to see whether or not, just to check your information sometimes. So this first interview could happen through the phone or through one of those video applications, but still, because sometimes to save cost for both you, the candidate, and for the organization, instead of having to travel and instead of having to set up a meeting room with logistics, etc., and because of nowadays of the conditions and the circumstances of the pandemic, so everyone nowadays is doing everything remotely, is doing everything online. So video and phone interviews are something to prepare for, and they are quite straightforward as long as you give them enough preparation. Typically speaking, in a typical interview, the last part is going to be for you, the interviewee, the job candidate, the job seeker, to ask any questions if you have any. And it is always advised to ask questions, first of all, to get to know more about the position that you are applying for, and to get to know more about the company and the people that you will be working with. So here are some suggestions for your own questions. So at the end, towards the end of the interview, you are going to be asked, do you have any questions for us? You should say yes. And here are some suggestions. So you need to know more about the company, you need to know more about the job itself. So can you please describe what the typical day looks like in your company? So from 7 to 4, can you just describe to me what does it look like? Ask about, development opportunities, training opportunities. Ask about career paths. Ask about learning, opportunities. Ask about, anything that indicates, first of all, that you are not only interested, but you know what you are talking about, and you have a genuine interest in getting to know more, so that you see whether or not there's a good fit. This is actually good for you, not just to show off, but to actually know more about the company and to make an informed decision. See how they would respond to your answers, to your questions. See whether or not their answers, they have red flags or something, that there's an indication that maybe this is not a good fit for me, or maybe this is the opposite, this is this is my dream job actually. So if you want, you can pause the video and go through some of those questions to understand what kind of things you can ask in order for you to know more. And from now on, through the coming couple of slides, we will be talking about some of the most common interview questions and how would you respond to them. So the first one is, tell me about yourself. That's a typical interview questions. This is probably the first thing that you will be asked in any type of interview. Can you please tell me a little about yourself? Can you please talk a little about yourself? So it does seem like an easy question, but it's I mean, you don't there are certain strategies that you use for your answer to be effective. First of all, we the interviewers, the HR department has already received your resume. So we know a little about your education, we know a little about your work experience if you have any, etc. So we don't want you to repeat what is there on the resume already. We want to know something more. Talk about your achievements, for example. Talk about some of your, some of your interests, anything that you couldn't mention on the resume, as long as it is something that indicates that you're a good match to the job that you are applying for. So you can tell them about what you have been doing so far in terms of self-development. So what kind of training courses have you been doing? What kind of projects, even if it's off the job, what kind of projects you have been working on, and as much as you can, give examples. As much as you can, give examples. So the whole point of this question is for the managers, for the people interviewing you, to know something more about you. So to kind of like form a first impression, and whether to judge whether or not on a snap judgment, whether or not you are a good fit with this company. So when they say tell me about yourself, it doesn't mean tell me everything. We don't want to know, for example, how old are you, where did you grow up, who are your best friends, what football team you like to support. No, we want to know something that is not on your resume, something that is job related but it's not on the resume, and as much as possible use examples. Another common question is why we should hire you. What sets you apart from other candidates? Okay, you don't want to say something like hire me because I'm the best. You don't want to say something like something to sound braggy, and something to sound like you have that you are full of yourself, basically. So you need to keep your answer, again, professional, yet humble and professional at the same time. So show me, don't just tell me. I mean, don't tell me I am the best person for the job. I mean, you could be, but show me how. Tell me examples of why we should hire you. You can tell them, in my last job, I was able to improve the sales by 20%. And I believe I can do the same for you, or even better. You can tell them, when I was a student, I led a team and we won an award, and I believe that these types of qualities will be very much helpful in this position that I'm applying for in your company. So show me instead of just telling me. Otherwise, you're just going to sound a little braggy. What is your long range objective? So you would find sometimes yourself being asked, where do you see yourself in 5 years or in 10 years? So what is the key here? The key here is to focus on the achievable objectives and what you are currently doing to achieve them, what you are currently doing to reaching those objectives. So instead of saying something like, I mean, one of the funny stories, one manager asked an interview, a person applying, a candidate, where do you see yourself in 5 years? And the candidate responded, in your place, asking better questions. I mean, that sounds a little funny, but it's of course you will never be hired based on such answers. So what you want to do for such a question is to focus on something that is achievable. You don't want to say things like, I want to be the best at what I do. Again, it's all about reality. It's all about what you are currently actually doing towards becoming the best. You want to say something like, I want to be a senior accountant, or I want to be a senior project engineer. I want to be a programmer who is knowledgeable about all types of programming languages. And what are you doing right now? You can say that I'm currently studying to become certified. I am currently doing a lot of online courses. I will enroll in the next year in a university to do a master's, whatever it is. I mean, you can just give the people who are asking questions, give them some concrete examples of what it is you are doing to achieve those plans of yours to become for those plans of yours to become a reality in the next 5 years. So this is how you could answer such a question in an effective way. Focus on the achievable objectives. Don't say, I just want to be the best. This is very abstract. Give me something concrete, and also tell me, what are you doing to become the best? How has your education prepared you for your career? So basically what they're asking here is, you say you have a bachelor's degree in mechanical engineering from Jebel University College. How is that good for me? I'm SABIC, for example. How your education is going to be helpful for you as an engineer at SABIC? So it is a broad question, and you definitely need to focus on something concrete, and typically behavioral examples. So you can say things like, try to mention some of the strengths in your education. So you can mention things like, we have a very practical curriculum where we studied certain software, or we had a lot of workshops where we actually worked with our hands to understand how the plant operates. Or you can say things like, the language of instruction is English, and that has helped me a lot when it comes to language, and I know that the language of communication in SABIC is also English. So you can say things like that, like link specific examples, specific strengths from your degree, from your education, to and how link it to how is this helpful or of value to the company. Are you a team player? A very common question. And of course, everyone is going to say yes. And the issue with that question is that it's not a yes or no question. You need to provide, again, examples. Now, this is the fifth question that we have discussed so far, and in each of those questions we said that you need to have examples. Don't just be general, don't just be abstract. You need to give concrete examples, behavioral situations in which you display and show and demonstrate how you are a team player, how you are the best at what you do, why we should hire you. Give me examples. Okay, so you can say things, yes, I do believe I'm a good team player. For example, just go ahead and start telling a story or an example about in which you show that you are a good team player. You can tell them, in my previous job I had a team project and we worked just fine. Or you can tell them, when I was a student at JUC, we had to work on a group assignment, and I was able to motivate my team and get 10 out of 10 in that assignment. Just explain and give concrete examples of how you are a good team player. So emphasize those behavioral examples. And as long as nowadays, people who work in organizations, they come from different backgrounds, from different ethnicities, from different cultures. So try to show that you are a good team player, yes, but you are also open to different styles, to different personalities. You can say something like this, that in JUC, like most of my professors, most of my instructors were from different backgrounds, from different parts of the world, from different religions, from different races. And this was a rich experience for me, and it gave me the opportunity to interact with such people, with such a diverse body of instructors, etc. So it shows how exactly you are good when it comes to working with people from different backgrounds. Another question would be, if you had a problem, with someone in the past, and how did you resolve it? So this is a behavioral question. Remember, a behavioral question asks about a situation that happened with you in the past, so that they can predict what you would do in the future, because in the future you would be handling a similar situation. So typically speaking, they would ask you if you had a problem with someone who is above you. So if, like a supervisor, if you had a previous job, or a professor in your college if you are a fresh graduate. So if you had a conflict, if you had a conflict, how did you handle it? Now, some of you would say, I could just say no and avoid the question altogether. I wouldn't advise it. because they ask this question for a reason. They want to know, how are you when it comes to conflict resolution? How are you when it comes to team playing? How are you when it comes to dealing with authority, for example, someone who has authority over you, like a boss or a professor. So it is always advised to say, yes, I did have I have had a conflict with a supervisor or with a professor, and then again go back with the STAR approach. STAR: situation, task, action, and result. So give us some context first, explain the situation, what happened, and then explain what did you do. You can say that I sent him an email and I said that this and that, or I went to his office and we talked things through, and then what was the result? What was the result? What happened? That the professor or the supervisor was convinced of my argument, and he granted me the approval, or gave me an extension on the assignment, etc. Again, it's all about examples. What is your greatest weakness, or what is your greatest strength? This is something that you would typically encounter in any type of interview. Now, the problem with this question is that a lot of people are going to say, they are going to bring a strength, and they are going to display it as a weakness. For example, they would say, one of my weaknesses is that I work too much, or I work very hard. This is a weakness. This is a wrong approach. This is not something that your recruiters are going to like. So it uses a strength and present it as a weakness. That's one of the problems with with such approach, and it misses the point of the question. We want to get to know more about you, so you should actually respond with an actual weakness, but you need to mention a weakness that you have been working to improve, and you need to mention the steps that you have taken so far to overcome this weakness. So you can say that I had a problem when it comes to adhering to deadlines. Sometimes I would miss the deadlines of certain projects or assignments. However, but I have been taking courses online in time management. I have been trying to get some tips from experts about how to prioritize my activities, and then tell me a result. And I have been improving in this, and for the past 3 months I have submitted all my projects on time. So mention an actual weakness, but mention what you have been taking in terms of steps so far to overcome it, and and strengthen it, and what were the results that mention some improvement. So sometimes people would ask you this in an interview as well, like, if we were to ask your colleague or your friend about you, to describe you, what do you think they would say about you? Now, one of the problems with this question is that they might actually do that and go ahead and ask that professor or that friend of yours. So you don't want to lie. You want to mention something that is realistic. So if you know that you are going for an interview, prepare for such a question by asking that same question to your friends, to your professors, etc. Go to one of your professors and ask them, if you were to describe me in one sentence, what would you say about me? So that you know something to say to those people in the interview. Ask your colleagues, ask your friends, ask the people who are around you. Ask them to describe it before you go for the interview, so that you have something, you have an idea at least about what you are going to what you are going to say, and whether or not they are actually willing to become a reference. Because oftentimes companies and organizations are going to check your references. They're going to tell you, provide us with 2 names and their contact information. So give me the name of your previous boss, or give me the name of your previous supervisor in co-op, or give me the name of one of your professors, and they are going to come to me and ask me through an email to evaluate you. So they would get something more about you. So you need to you need to prepare for this. Ask your professors, your previous supervisors, whether or not they are willing to become references and whether or not they are willing to offer, to provide you with a recommendation. So as long as you prepare for it, you will be in good shape. So you can ask them, you can ask your friends and colleagues and professors to tell you what they think about you so that you have something to report in the interview. And then, what qualities do you feel a successful manager should have? Now, this is kind of like, a case question, but not very specific. So they are trying to assess, number one, your technical knowledge and expertise, and they're trying to assess your your style and your perceptions of leadership, for example, or management. So focus on two words, especially for management: leadership and vision. Okay, and then tell them how leadership and vision translated into your personal delivered results. What that means is this: management, and managers will be successful in case they have good leadership qualities. They know how to handle people from different backgrounds and such, and they have a long-term vision. Instead of only seeing what's near, they see what could happen in the next 5 to 10 years. So explain that when it comes to a good manager should have leadership qualities as well as a good vision. And how do those qualities, how do leadership and vision impacted you, and how they would impact you in the future? So here's a sample response. If you want, you can pause the video and just read what's happening here. So you can tell them how how a certain professor, for example, who was a good leader or who displayed a good vision, who he prepared you with an assignment for the future. You can tell them how that assignment was one of the most motivating things that you have that you have experienced in college, or how that particular assignment, because it was future oriented and because it was managed well by the professor, how it you feel that it was the most valuable thing you learned and how it improved your performance tremendously. So things like that. Again, you don't just say things plainly. You have to mention concrete examples. So you say leadership and vision are the success factors for a manager. Tell me why and how. How was that impactful for you in the past, and how it would be impactful for you in the future? If you had to live your life over again, what one thing would you change? So in here they want to know if you were given a second chance. If you were given a second chance when it comes to major life decisions, what would you change? Are you going to still decide to come study at JUC? Are you going to still decide to study business administration, or would you change your major? Are you still going to decide to live in Jubail, etc.? Things like that. So what are they assessing here? They are kind of assessing your not life choices, but they're assessing how you look at life and how you look at major milestones in your life. So things like your perceptions about how you view yourself as a successful decision maker, as a successful professional, as a good candidate for this particular position. So focus on key turning points in your life or missed opportunities, but you have to link it to forward events so that you are still pursuing that change. So for example, you can say that even though I am very happy with my life choices so far, and the decisions I have made have served me well throughout my life so far, but I wish I had, for example, accepted an internship opportunity at company X. I believe it would have prepared me better for the future, etc. So and again, mention how are you going to improve this in the future when it comes to how you will be making your future decisions. So you can say that in the future I would I would evaluate my options more thoroughly. and I would, one of the mistakes that I've done last time is that I didn't ask enough questions. Next time I would, ask a lot of questions to ensure that I have, a comprehensive view of the situation so that I can make an informed decision. So how, to summarize, what would you do here to answer that question? Do mention something that it's not something that you regret, but something you believe that could have changed your life, but still express that you are happy with your life currently, and how would you, do and take such decisions in the future? How would you improve your decision-making process, your decision-making abilities, and in the future, so that you make better informed decisions? Dress code for interviews. Of course, you have to keep it professional and formal. In the kingdom here, we have two types of, formal clothing. So you could either go with the picture on the left-hand side with people wearing formal Saudi attire with full, ghutrash, iqal, and thob, with the shoes also, or you could go with the Western style, either, completely formal with, suit and tie, or you could go with long-sleeved shirts and, formal trousers, as well as dark-colored shoes. So the same thing also applies for ladies, as long as they keep it professional. And again, in the kingdom, they could have two options: either to go with the abaya or to go with, professional-looking formal attire. So again, the same kind of rules apply. Keep your colors simple, and they have to be coordinated, and typically they would be dark colored. Typically in the business environment, you would see people wearing dark colors like gray, brown, dark blue, black, etc. The next part of our chapter is going to be about follow-up after the interview. So now that you have completed your job interview, what steps can you expect next? We have seen in the selection process how you could be chosen for a second and a third interview, and then you would be given maybe a test or something. So there are a number of things that you can expect right after an interview. But in terms of, in case you think that connection is lost, what can you do to ensure that the process is still undergoing? You could face some of these, issues when it comes to breakdown of communication, like things are just lost. So you would receive a phone call from someone saying that, you have an interview the next week, and then you come for the interview, and then just blank, nothing is happening. No one has contacted you on email, no one has contacted you on your phone. There's absolutely no communication coming from anywhere. So sometimes such things happen. Of course, from an HR perspective, this is not a professional thing to do on, parts of the company. They need to keep their candidates informed. Some companies would say, if you didn't receive any update from us in the next 14 days, then you can consider your application rejected. Honestly speaking, I wouldn't prefer such a way. HR people should be more professional than that. Everyone should be informed of the results of their application. Even if they are rejected, they deserve to be respected enough to receive a rejection letter, just to be informed that they shouldn't pursue this job anymore, that they have been rejected. You don't just keep someone hanging like that. So sometimes you wouldn't receive any communication, or sometimes, you would send, they would tell you, please send us some documents. You would send them, and then you never know whether they received it or not. Some companies, unfortunately, are not handling things in a professional way. So you need to be patient, and you need to encourage them to expedite maybe the process of responding to your application. So this is kind of an old way, because typically speaking, no one uses voice messages and voicemails nowadays. But what the rules and the etiquette that applies to leaving voice messages and voicemails also applies to any messages that you leave. So if it's even a voice note on WhatsApp, or if it's a simple SMS message, or a short email, again, you need to keep it simple. You need to keep it short, and you need to use the direct plan. You need to mention your request, or your main idea first, and then you need to keep it as light and also as formal and as respectful as possible. Let's listen to to a couple of examples to see what we have.
Hi, Ms. Katona. This is Kathy Lynn. I'm following up on a resume that I sent in for the finance management trainee position. I would love to have a chat with you about the position. My number is 212-555-3947. I'd really appreciate a call back. Thanks so much. Bye.
So even if it were an email, or a short SMS, text message, you need to keep it as light as what you've just heard. You mention who you are, you mention what you want, and you mention some way to contact you. It's as simple as that. So keep it light and keep it professional, keep it respectful. Let's listen to the second example, on the part of the interviewer.
Hello, this is Peter Ellison, and I received your resume for a summer position. I'd like to schedule an interview with you for Friday, October 7th at 3 p.m. The interview will be at my office at 114 Morris Avenue. Please call me back at your earliest convenience and let me know if you're available at that time. Thank you, and I look forward to meeting you in person. Bye.
So if you were to receive such a message, how would you respond? Again, follow the previous example. Keep it light, keep it simple, keep it straightforward and informative. So, and also respectful. So when you respond, you say thank you for your, for your message, or thank you for your email. I would be happy to attend the interview at the specified time. And you're just basically confirming that you will be attending, and you can ask them what documents should I bring with me. Or if you want, you can just call them if they requested that you call them. Call them on the number that they specified, and just simply ask what they want, from you. If it's an in-person, a face-to-face interview, or is it going to be an online meeting, and what kind of setup do you need? So what to do after an interview? After you are done with your job interview, you need to, revise. You need to look back and see what have you done well and what you think needs a little improvement. So you are basically critiquing your performance and critiquing your resume and your cover letter. So you are looking back at the resume, you are looking back at the cover letter, you have the email that you wrote, you are trying to remember some of your answers in the interview to see what could you have changed and you believe would have been more effective. You can judge sometimes from the feedback that you are receiving during the interview itself. Either it's from body language, from head nods, or sometimes they would actually make a comment about your resume, that they would tell you, well, I didn't really understand why you wrote this in the resume, or I didn't understand what exactly your job was when you were a volunteer at this institution. So this is a negative point that you need to take and try to improve. So critique everything about your performance, and one of the polite suggestions is to send a thank you email to the person who interviewed you. So after you are done with the interview, like towards the end of the working day, you can send an email to the person who invited you for this interview and tell them, I was honored to meet you today, and I'm hoping that I'm hoping to hear from you soon, and in case there are any requests on my part, I would be happy to provide you with anything that you need. Thank you so much. It's as simple as 2 sentences. If you are just being polite and you're just being respectful. The thing to remember here is that you want to keep it formal. You want to keep it professional, and you don't want to become annoying. So only send it once. That's it. You don't want to send every day, thank you, thank you, thank you. People are going to be annoyed by this. You're being extra polite to the point where it's becoming annoying. So just send it one time and just wait for them to follow up. And now with the last part in our chapter, etiquette. So what is etiquette? It's those, unwritten rules that you need to follow whenever you are in a business situation. You would find yourself sometimes having dinner with business people. Sometimes interviews and, some steps in the employment process would happen during lunch. It could happen. Maybe on your first day as a new employee, your supervisor is going to, invite you to the company's restaurant, and they would offer that you share a meal together and, to discuss things casually. So what kind of things you need to, follow, and what kind of things you need to avoid. When it comes to, having dinner, or, when it comes to having a meal with someone in a business situation, there are things to do before, during, and after. So what do you do before the meal? First of all, confirm dietary restrictions, especially if you are inviting people, or, if you are being invited, then, try to search the restaurant and see if they are offering, options that are suitable for you. If you are allergic maybe to certain types of food, then you need to confirm if this thing is, if they can offer you options that are suitable for you or for your guests. Then of course you have to make reservations. You don't want to go to a restaurant and then find out that there are no available tables. It's advised that you order last, so you give your guests the chance to order first, and just to kind of gauge the environment and see, even if you are the guest, if you can order last, then order last, because you want to see what's the norm, what others are ordering. You don't want to sound, you don't want to be the odd one out. And then avoid pungent dishes. What that means is that, certain types of foods have a very strong and sharp smell, like garlic, for example. So try to avoid these dishes, especially if it's, you are meeting someone for the first time. And then wait for the host to start eating before you do. So for the person who invited you, wait for them to begin, or to, to give a signal that, you can, let's all eat, then start eating. You don't want, again, to be, in an embarrassed situation where you start eating and everyone else is still waiting. And then during the meal, when you are now actually eating, when you have started eating, when you've started your first course, stay engaged in conversation. People go to business dinners and business lunches because they want to chat. They want to chat casually. They want to chat in an environment that is outside of their regular workspace. So try your best to keep engaged in the conversation. Try to, laugh at the jokes. Try to, keep the conversation lively. When you are eating, take small bites. Even if you are, extra hungry, keep it, try to keep calm and take smaller bites so that you don't, sound off-putting to others. You need to use the outer silverware first. How in the restaurant, for example, sometimes the forks and the knives and the spoons are organized in a certain way, are laid out in a certain way. You start with the outer parts first, and then you move your way in. Then you keep your elbows off the table. That's kind of a gentleman's code. You don't keep your elbows on the table, because it could, you could spill some food on your clothes, and it's just basically not good manners. And then finally, you leave napkin on the chair. So if you had to leave your chair and go to the restroom, or if you had to go and pick something, for example, the napkin should be kept on the chair, not on the table, because it could be dirty. You don't want to, offend others by your dirty napkin. So keep it on your chair, and it indicates that someone is here and is going to come back. Then after the meal, after you have done eating, don't take any leftovers home. It's again kind of a a signal that first of all, you leave you have leftovers because you have ordered more than what you need. So order only the portions that are enough for you. Then you can offer the host to pay. Even if you were invited, you can say, let me try to take this one, and you can take the next one. Just, you are being respectful, you're being a gentleman. Then thank the payer, the person who paid for your meal. And if you are going to pay, then you should leave a tip, and it's typically between 15 to 20% of the total amount of your bill. And then finally, once you go home, send a thank you note. So as simple as a WhatsApp message, or as simple as an SMS text message. Right later in the evening, once you have gone home and changed to your pajamas, just send the person who invited you, thank you so much for a good night and the good food, and I really appreciate it. As simple and as short as this, it makes people feel appreciated, and it makes you remembered. Managing your online reputation. I mean, one of the first things that recruiters nowadays do when they invite someone for an interview, when they receive someone's resume, is that they would search them online. So they would try to find something about you, so to understand more about you, to see whether or not they have made the right decision of selecting you. So they would go to things like your social media accounts if they are public. They would visit your LinkedIn profile if you have one, and you should have one actually. They are going to visit your Bates.com profile, for example, if you have one. So before you go for an interview, and just in general, before you apply even for a job, ensure that your online presence is professional. So Google yourself. Why not? Is there something in any website about you? And then manage your privacy settings. So you want to be known by others. In LinkedIn, for example, there's an option to be viewed by the public, or only people who follow you can view your profile. You want to be your profile to be public, otherwise recruiters are not going to know about you. Then you need to avoid posting questionable content. So especially, for example, if it's your LinkedIn profile, LinkedIn is a website. It's a social networking website that is with the sole purpose of, connecting job seekers to employers. So you don't want to post things that are unrelated there. This is not your Facebook profile. You don't want to post videos of, cute kittens. You don't want to post videos of your favorite football, player scoring a nice goal. Keep it professional on LinkedIn. Even the photo that you select for your profile should be professional looking, unlike your Instagram photo, for example. So avoid posting questionable content, unprofessional content, things that might be controversial, that that are going to raise some questions about your choices and your personality, etc., about your agenda, if you have any. Then post positive content that shows your strengths. So on LinkedIn, for example, or on your Twitter account if it's a public one, even on your Facebook page if you have one, on your YouTube channel, post positive content that demonstrate how good are you in a professional context. So post an announcement that says, today I finished my online course on leadership. It was a very informative course and I liked it, and this is my certificate. You are just sharing information about yourself, about your achievements, that recruiters are going to find helpful. And finally, what etiquette you should follow when you are working in an office. So you would have people sitting right next to you. You could have your own room, so your own office, or you could be in a cubicle, and or you could be in an open kind of layout. So you need to be respectful of your neighbors. You need to be respectful of the people who are sitting next to you. So always knock on your co-worker's cubicle. So don't just barge in. I mean, even though they have no doors, but just to be respectful. Maybe they are doing something private. Maybe they are, showing something confidential on their, computer screen. So before you just barge in, before you just, come into their cubicle, try to clear your throat, maybe, just to indicate that you are coming, and then you can knock on their cubicle just to inform them, signal to them that I'm coming now. Never shout a comment to the next cubicle. I mean, even though they are sitting right next to you, I mean, you don't want to shout, a comment or a request. Hey, Khalid, just send me that email right now. This is totally unprofessional. Totally unprofessional. If you want something from them, stand up, walk to them and tell them what you want. Or you can call them on their extension, even if they are sitting right next to you. Shouting is not good. Do not leave valuables unattended. In your cubicle, in your workspace, even in your office, if you want to leave your door open, then you shouldn't leave valuables unattended. So you don't want to leave your mobile phone, you don't want to keep your, computer screen open. You want to lock your account. You want to, keep your wallet all the time with you. If you have a special, you don't leave money. Don't leave, for example, your national ID, your driver's license. All of those things should be on you all the time. Or if you want to leave them at your cubicle, then leave them at a drawer and, lock the drawer with the key and take the key with you. You need to, keep these things in mind. Otherwise, I mean, people are going to, when they come and see things just, thrown on your desk, they are going to think of you as a careless person. Avoid talking on the phone too loudly. Yes, absolutely. I mean, people are sitting right next to you, just, a couple of feet away from you. So you don't want to disturb their, their atmosphere. So try to keep it light. When you are talking on your mobile phone or on the, on the landline, keep your voice at an appropriate level. You don't want to shout because you are now, disrupting others. And also avoid, eavesdropping on conversations. So, I mean, again, their cubicles don't have a lot of privacy. So you are going to accidentally listen and hear things, listen to things and hear things that are probably confidential. But avoid, paying attention to what's going on. If you feel like there's a, something, confidential that is being discussed, then try to distract yourself by writing an email or by putting on your headphones, anything to, to keep you from eavesdropping, from listening in on other people's conversations which are confidential. Thank you so much for watching this video. This is our last video for business communication, and I hope to see you on other courses.